So are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So what is your name?
My name is Emine Chomak.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born here in Cyprus.
Okay. And where do you live now?
I live also here in Nicosia, Cyprus.
Okay, great. And what is your occupation?
I'm the Turkish Cypriot Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Okay, wonderful. So tell me the story of the division of Cyprus. When did it happen and why?
Well, until 1960, at least, it was a British colony. But in 1960, three guarantor powers, Britain, Greece and Turkey, decided to give Cyprus independence, in which it became an independent country made up of two communities, basically, the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots. But that lasted between 1960 and 1963, because in the meantime the two communities, the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots, started to have conflict between them. And in 1963 the new republic collapsed. And it collapsed because there were incidents of violence and a kind of civil war in which the majority in terms of population, which was the Greek Cypriots, who were more dominant and who were never happy with an independent republic for Cyprus, but really wanted what we call enosis, which was the unification of Cyprus with Greece, because the Greek Cypriots wished to see a Hellenic island, or they regarded the island as predominantly Greek. But this is something that the Turkish Cypriots would never accept, and supported by Turkey also. It was preferred to have an independent, bi-communal, if you like, country, rather than one that was declared a part of Greece. But by 1963, the 1960 constitutional order collapsed. From 1963 till today, we have had no reinstatement of that full constitutional order in which the Turkish Cypriots take part. What have we had? We have had the organs or the structure of the country taken over by the Greek Cypriots, who then governed Cyprus as the legitimate, recognized administration, but recognized as such by the international community, even though it excluded the Turkish Cypriots within that administration. Then there was the second bout of violence in 1974. Again, arose from a situation where the Greek Cypriots among themselves were divided into two. A group that, supported by a Greek junta of the time, wanted again to annex Cyprus to Greece, and another group of Greek Cypriots who did not, who wanted Cyprus to remain independent. And there was a coup against the Greek Cypriot leader of that time, and an attempt to actually annex the island to Greece, at which point, as a guarantor power, Turkey intervened, conducted a military operation on the island, took a half of, well, the existing northern part of Cyprus, which is actually around a third. And again, through exchange of negotiations, reached an arrangement. An arrangement was reached whereby all the Turkish Cypriots living all over the island were gathered in the north, and all the Greek Cypriots living mixed on the island then moved to the south, giving rise to what we have today, the de facto situation whereby the south of the island is occupied by Greek Cypriots and the north by Turkish Cypriots, but the Greek Cypriot part remains the internationally recognized Republic of Cyprus, whereas the north remains the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which we as the Turkish Cypriots have founded in this interim. Again, but you must remember, all this time negotiations have been attempted to resolve the Cyprus problem and reinstate it as it should be, as a bi-communally shared country. And now that we have this division, but always a constant attempt to reunify, which is now at this moment in time again going through an intense negotiation process to reunify so that both sides are included in one federal structure. And everybody on the island has their full identity and their full status in the international community.
Wonderful, wonderful, thank you. So are the people on the other side, the Greek people, are they your friends or are they your enemies?
It's complicated, as Facebook would say. It's a love-hate relationship. I think there have been, in the past, there have been conflicts in which but the two sides have clashed, in which side there have been killings, there have been exclusion, there have been oppression, there's been people gone missing. There's been war again. For example, in 1974 there was a major war as a result of the military operation. So both sides have a history of conflict, and they also have a history which they then a method of teaching history which has reinforced the concept of being enemies over generations. But at the same time, we are all Cypriots in that we all feel we belong to this island, and we all feel that this island belongs to us. So we have in common the ownership of the island, so we have to formulate a structure whereby we can share the island. It means that we don't necessarily have to be insincere about our feelings for each other or our lack of trust for each other at the moment. And this is something that we need to work on. We need to improve that trust. Until 2003, it was not allowed to cross the line. The line was completely impenetrable except for special permission. But since 2003, there are crossing points in which each side, the people from each side can cross, shop, visit their own previously inhabited villages and homes, enjoy, have economic relations, and so on. Since 2003, there has been a very slow but gentle sort of getting more used to seeing each other and being with each other. But I wouldn't say there's been integration as such. I think, if anything, since 2003, maybe even people that had romantic and nostalgic ideas about a time when we all lived mixed, because it wasn't all war. There was also friendship, neighbourship, joint cultural things in common in terms of food, music, and so on. But I think more and more each side has probably come round to the idea that it's probably better just to stay within their own controlled areas, and that is a good basis for a federation, at least to start with, just to give it time to maybe evolve into a country where the line is less marked, or where people can interact without being so conscious of whether the person they are dealing with is Greek or Turkish.
Okay, great answer. Who is your favorite person on the other side?
My favorite person on the other side? Wow, that is an interesting question. I have great admiration for some of the women politicians on the other side. Androula Vassiliou is a Greek Cypriot politician. She's now got a post in within the European Union, and also Eleni Mavrou. She is also she's been mayor in the south, mayor of Nicosia, and also a political activist. And both women I also admire for their commitment to improve contacts with the Turkish Cypriots and to work for a solution, basically. But above all, I think my favorite person, again, is a woman. It's Katie Clerides. Again, she's the daughter of a leader, a Greek Cypriot leader, but she also was a politician herself. And again, someone who, at great risk at different times within her own community, made an effort to establish dialogue, who openly showed that she was making an effort to do something quite simple, like learn the Turkish language and use it with Turkish Cypriots. So I admire people who have had the courage to work for a reunification of Cyprus, not just from their own perspective, but also to have empathy for the other side, or for the Turkish Cypriots such as us.
Excellent. So, does your country's leadership support the division?
No, my country's leadership has, I think, learned to live with the division. The division is a reality. It's not something to rebel against, but it's a reality and a necessity at the moment that our administration now is working to convert into the basis of a solution. I think the solution will somehow, in a loose form, conserve the division, in that there will be two zones. It's a bizonal, bicommunal federation that is the parameters of the solution. So I think that division in a way will be preserved, at least, as I say, in the beginning, until it evolves into something more loose, and maybe people will forget where the line was in time, even though it will be an administrative line also. But I wouldn't say that our administration sort of clings to or is particularly fond of the division as it is now.
Okay. And what about the Greek side? Does their administration, their government, support the division of Cyprus?
No, no. If anything, they have a far less attachment to the division, in that they, in particular, would like to see a reunified and unitary state. I think opinion polls, and when you speak to Greek Cypriots, if you ask them what would be your first choice as a solution, they would wish for a unitary state, not a federal one. But I think the federal one, in which we have bizonality and bicommunality, is going to be the safer one, at least to begin with, because of the past conflicts that has, and a division that has isolated and polarized the two sides from each other. I mean, it's about living back to back, never mind being sort of mixed, but we were living back to back and considering each other enemies for many, many years. And there's no magic stick where you undo that. That takes time and effort. This is why I say that, for example, the increased number of crossing points, some bicommunal activities, some efforts for reconciliation, such as joint efforts to find missing persons from past conflicts. These kind of efforts are all important and need to be supported to just regain that trust and that dialogue between the two sides.
Okay. What does the Turkish side have to gain by a resolution?
Well, primarily we have an end to what I consider the limbo that we are in, which is non-recognition and uncertainty. If nobody recognizes you and there's no sign of any other country except Turkey recognizing you in the near future, that means you're completely excluded from the international community and all the normalization that gives you, whether it's travel documents, direct flights, trade between different countries, EU membership, everything. You're inside a bubble in which you cannot operate like other legitimate countries considered legitimate can do. Plus, what is worse, you are also a part of Cyprus, and there is a recognized Cyprus, again, from which you are excluded. And even something like the European Union, despite all its fundamental principles, can say to us, well, all of Cyprus is in the EU, all the people living in Cyprus, the Cypriots, are all EU citizens, but they will not interact with the North. We have no representation within the EU. We cannot send people to the EU Parliament, so the EU sits there and takes decisions on our behalf, or decides whether they're going to give us funding or not, but we're not there to have a say when they are deciding our fate. So I think there are a lot of dilemmas and inconsistencies that would all be removed if we have a solution in which, as I say, we are then a resolved and single Cyprus, in which we have also the parameters in place that will make us feel safe and able to develop the trust that we need to reinstate.
Is there now, or has there ever been an effort to get more diplomatic recognition independently of a resolution of the situation with the South?
There has. I think immediately after the declaration of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus in 1983, there were serious desires and efforts to try to get our country recognized. I think in time we have become more realistic and realized that it's practically impossible for us to be recognized as a separate country. But at the same time, I think it's important for us to be recognized or acknowledged as a state, an organized rule of law, as a democratic society that is trying to improve and has a certain standard of human rights and democracy, who is trying to achieve independence in terms of self-governance and economy, who has a high standard of education and a modern society. I think to be seen as such is important, because when you are excluded and when you are being opposed or always presented by the other side as being breakaway, pseudo, so-called, self-styled, you know, all this terminology, which is very crushing, it's very offensive. And it also brings a backlash of trying to cling to your identity and establish yourself and prove yourself that you are here and you exist. International recognition then becomes another issue, a legal technicality, and then you're struggling and fighting to be seen as an existing reality as the Turkish Cypriot community or the Turkish Cypriot state, recognized or not.
What does the Greek side have to gain by a resolution?
I think the Greek side, primarily, they are particularly wounded by the division of the island, which, from their point of view, means they are excluded from the north, which is out of their control. I think they will be happier with a reunified Cyprus in terms of regaining, again, normalization on the island. They also have an expectation, and there is work being done on how their property rights will be reinstated, because they have lost much property since 1974 in the north. There will also be economic prospects, both arising from the island and also from basically the suspension of trading relations with Turkey, because this is, again, because of the dispute with Cyprus. Turkey refuses to either recognize or to trade or to open its ports to the Republic of Cyprus. If that is improved and removed, then there will be good trade relations with Turkey, which means economic prospects, because we must remember that maybe not to the extent of Greece, but the Republic of Cyprus has also had economic problems, which has got itself into trouble with the EU also. The other new thing that is a fairly recent factor that is of advantage to both sides is the prospect of hydrocarbons around Cyprus. And this means that if we can obtain a peaceful solution in which we are both reconciled on the island as two communities, the owners of the island, and also with our neighbours, especially Turkey and Greece, then if there are hydrocarbons that can be explored, then how these can be actually exploited and exported in the most feasible and profitable manner, then that can only bring prosperity and advantage to all of the Cypriots together. So I think that that's a point where both sides' interests overlap.
I see. So if both sides have so much to gain, why has it not been resolved already?
Yeah, I think both sides, but in particular the Greek Cypriot side, have always clung to their maximalist expectations. For peace, for reconciliation, you have to accept that you won't get 100% of everything that you want and expect and hope for. It's about compromise. It's about counting your losses. It's about a leap of faith. So you can't guarantee every last penny of compensation for what you have lost. Nobody can compensate us because the Turkish Cypriots have also suffered loss and disadvantage over this period. We can't, any of us, expect to be compensated penny for penny for every drop of blood, sweat and tears, or for every loss of property. And there are other international relations realities that we also have to face. There are 3 guarantor powers here who will not just go away. They will still be involved. They will still be a party, and they will still have a say in the final solution of the Cyprus problem and how they will convert their guarantorship into being guarantors and securing the new Cyprus under the agreement. And it may be easy to say, well, we don't want any guarantors, you know, they can all go away. But again, that's going to be, I think, a maximalist expectation. And why I say it's the Greek Cypriot side that have a higher expectation is because in 2004 we had the Annan Plan, which was an agreement that the UN drafted together with the Cypriots on both sides, and for which the Turkish Cypriot side said yes, but the Greek Cypriot side said no, and so it didn't come into effect. And the Turkish Cypriots, why I mention this maximalist claim is that Turkish Cypriots under that agreement, maybe up to a third of them, would have had to be displaced again, would have had to either move because of territorial adjustment or maybe move because of property adjustments. But they said yes, despite this. Whereas the Greek Cypriot side, you know, although they had a fair amount to gain, the things that they had hoped to gain but were not in the agreement, or their lack of faith in the implementation of the agreement, persuaded them to say no. So again, now I think we are back to the drawing board, if you like, and now working on new agreement. And I am just hopeful, and I think it will be successful if all of us have less high expectations of every last penny of justice, but a kind of investment in into the future for our children and grandchildren.
Excellent. How would life change for Turkish Cypriots if the wall was removed and you know, anyone could cross, anything could cross?
Well, first, there would be a lot of economic activity. There would be a lot more prospects for our youth, in particular, in terms of business and employment. There would be more opportunities for Turkish Cypriots to work abroad or compete abroad in sporting activities or in their professional fields, because again, at the moment, exclusion means that, I don't know, a football team, Turkish Cypriot football team, can't have a match anywhere in the world in any recognized league, or our professional groups cannot go, or our cultural groups, when they try to go abroad and participate in events, they will be excluded. We will have travel documents with our own identity as Turkish Cypriots, part of the reunified Cyprus, that will be acceptable throughout the world, and so that we don't have this present trouble that we have with travel documents. And I think, above all, to have certainty, to have an end to the uncertainty in which we live, whereby we don't know, well, what's going to happen? When is there going to be another round of talks? What will happen to property issues? Well, I've been living here now, you know, since the division, but I can't be sure whether this property is going to be mine, or there's going to be somebody coming to my door and saying, you know, this is claimed, or whether there's going to be more court cases, whether it's the European court or any other, or European country courts trying to dispute property issues here. So I think, above all, we need, and life will change for us in that there will be certainty, which will then also have the psychological benefit as well as the economic one, in terms of investment and in terms of new business prospects.
Wonderful. Okay, so last question. People from all over the world might be watching this video. What's the most important thing for them to know about what's happening here?
I think I would really like the island of Cyprus to be in everybody's radar as a country where there has been a conflict for over 50 years, but for which there is also a prospect of resolving that conflict. The fact that there is no bloodshed here, and it's become what we call a frozen conflict, is good and bad. It means that we're lucky, and when we look at many other countries in the world where there is bloodshed, we're lucky that we have a safe island, and there is no hot conflict at the moment. But I would complete that by saying that the fact that there is no war or no bloodshed doesn't mean that everything is fine. You can have this frozen conflict which is like a cloud, is like a shadow that sinks upon you in the absence of a political solution, which is what we are seeking now.
Wonderful.